The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years they answered that call. By the year 2347, humans lived on 17 different worlds across the galaxy. They built cities on frozen moons and farming colonies on planets with purple skies. They were proud of what they had done. They thought they understood the universe. They were wrong. Commander Jake stood on the bridge of the starship Resolute and watched the space station grow larger through the viewport. Prime was a massive structure, built by aliens thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. It floated in neutral space, a place where different species came to trade and talk. Today, humanity would ask for a seat at the table. "She's beautiful," said Lieutenant Amy Grant, the young officer standing beside him. Her eyes were wide with wonder. She had never seen anything built by aliens before. Jake nodded slowly. "Beautiful and dangerous, remember that." The Resolute was not alone. 2 other human ships flew beside it. The cargo vessel Dawn Carrier held trade goods and gifts. The frigate provided protection. Together, they carried humanity's hopes for the future. Ambassador Grace Collins waited in the shuttle bay. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years talking to difficult people and making them agree. Kings, presidents, and rebels had all sat across the table from her, but today she faced something new. Today she would speak to beings who had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. The Dominion controlled everything. 12 species served under their banner, though most had forgotten they were ever free. They themselves were tall creatures with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. They moved like dancers and thought like computers. They had seen empires rise and fall while humans still lived in caves. Grace studied her notes one final time. The key was respect. Show strength but not aggression. Offer value but not desperation. She had practiced this dance many times. She was ready. The shuttle carried her team to the station. Jake watched it go and felt a cold weight in his stomach. Something felt wrong. He could not explain it. He had learned to trust that feeling during 20 years in space. "Keep weapons ready," he told his crew quietly. "But do not power them up. We are here in peace." Inside Prime, Grace and her team were led through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of something that looked like glass but felt warm to the touch. Strange lights floated in the air without any visible source. Aliens of many shapes watched them pass. Some had too many eyes. Others had no eyes at all. All of them stared at the humans with something that might have been curiosity or hunger. The council chamber was round and vast. Seats rose up on all sides like a stadium. At the center, a single platform held a table and chairs. Grace walked to her place and sat down without showing fear. Archon entered from above, descending on a platform of light. He was old even by standards. His skin had faded to pale silver, and his 4 arms moved with the slow grace of someone who had all the time in the universe. Behind him came his advisors, including a young commander named whose eyes never left the humans. "You have come far," said. His voice was like wind through dead leaves. "Your species is young. Your worlds are few. Why should the Dominion care what you want?" Grace smiled politely. "Because we offer what no other species can, fresh perspectives, new ideas. Humans solve problems differently. We could be valuable partners." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are children playing at being adults. Your technology is primitive. You are short. What could you possibly offer us?" The negotiations continued for hours. Grace made her arguments carefully. She showed examples of human innovation. She offered trade agreements and cultural exchange. She promised that humanity would follow galactic law and respect authority. Listened without expression. When Grace finished, he simply stood and left. The talks would continue tomorrow, his advisors said. The humans were given quarters to rest. Jake did not rest. He stood on the Resolute's bridge and watched the stars and felt that cold feeling grow stronger. Amy brought him coffee and stood beside him in silence. "Something is wrong," he said finally. Everything seemed fine, Amy replied. The ambassador did well. Jake shook his head. They were too calm. They asked no questions. They made no demands. When someone has all the power and they don't use it, they're planning something. The answer came at midnight, station time. Had grown tired of watching humans speak as if they mattered. He had fought 100 battles for the Dominion. He had burned worlds and broken fleets. These small, soft creatures from a minor planet dared to ask for equality. He would teach them their place. His ships came out of hiding behind Prime's moon. 30 warships against 3 human vessels. Did not even bother to announce his attack. He simply opened fire. The Dawn carrier died first. The cargo ship had no weapons, no shields worth mentioning. It broke apart in a ball of fire and 200 humans died in an instant. The lasted longer. Its captain, a brave woman named Bate Taylor, fought back with everything she had. She destroyed 2 ships before her own vessel was torn in half. Jake felt his ship shake as weapons hit the Resolute. Alarms screamed. Crew members shouted reports of damage. The hull was breaking. Life support was failing. They had minutes to live. "Get us out of here," Jake ordered. His voice was calm even as his heart pounded. All power to engines now. The Resolute ran. It was not built for war, but it was fast. Jake pushed the engines beyond their limits. Metal groaned. Systems sparked and died. But the ship moved faster and faster until finally the weapons could not reach them. Behind him, the attack ended as quickly as it began. 3 human ships reduced to 1. Over 400 people dead. Ambassador Collins captured and taken prisoner. They considered it a minor action, barely worth recording. Returned to a hero's welcome. He had shown the humans their place. Now they would crawl back to their little worlds and never bother the Dominion again. The council agreed. The matter was settled. But Archon noticed something strange in the recordings of the battle. As the Resolute fled, burning and broken, its commander had looked directly at the nearest ship. Jake's face had been visible for just a moment. He was not afraid. He was not desperate. He was memorizing. On a crippled ship limping toward home, Jake made a promise to the dead, to Bate Taylor and her crew, to the families on the Dawn carrier, to Ambassador Collins wherever she was now. "We will come back," he whispered to the stars, "and when we do, the galaxy will remember this day forever." He did not know it yet, but he was right. They had made a mistake, not just a mistake, but the worst mistake in the history of their species. They had provoked humanity. And humanity never forgets. The news reached Earth at the speed of light. Within 6 hours, every human in the galaxy knew what had happened at Prime. They saw the footage from the Resolute's damaged cameras. They watched their ships burn. They saw faces of the dead scroll across their screens. For one day, humanity was silent. People gathered in public squares and living rooms. They held each other and wept. They lit candles for the 400 who would never come home. On the second day, the silence ended. The anger came like a wave. It started small with protests and speeches. Then it grew. Factory workers refused to make anything except weapons. Scientists abandoned their research to build new ships. Young people lined up at recruitment centers, so many that the lines stretched for miles. Admiral Torres received her orders on the 3rd day. She was 60 years old, with white hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much war. 20 years ago, she had fought in the colony rebellions. She had hoped she would never fight again. But when the call came, she answered. "You will command the first strike fleet," the president told her. "Build it, train it, and when the time comes, use it." Looked at the files on her desk. Humanity had ships, but not enough. They had soldiers, but not experienced ones. They had technology, but nothing compared to 40,000 years of advancement. "How long do I have?" she asked. "As long as you need," the president replied. "But make it fast, the people want blood." Understood. Anger was a useful tool, but it burned hot and fast. She had to strike before it faded. She had to win before humanity lost its nerve. Across the galaxy, Jake refused to rest. Doctors told him his injuries were severe. He ignored them. Counselors told him he needed time to process his trauma. He ignored them too. He had work to do. The Resolute had captured fragments of weapons during the battle. Small pieces, damaged and burned, but enough to study. Jake brought them to Dr. Ben, who had spent his life studying alien life forms. Ben was a thin man with messy hair and glasses that always seemed crooked. He spoke quickly and often forgot to eat. But his mind was sharp, and he understood things that others missed. "This is incredible," Ben said, examining a piece of armor. "Their technology is advanced, but it's also stagnant. They've been using the same designs for thousands of years." Jake frowned. Why would they stop improving? Because they never had to. No one challenged them. They won so long ago that they forgot how to innovate. Ben's eyes lit up with excitement. "But we're different. We're young. We're hungry. We can learn their technology and make it better." They worked together for weeks, then months. Jake provided military knowledge. Ben provided scientific genius. Together, they unlocked secrets they had hidden for. They discovered weaknesses in biology. They found flaws in their shields and weapons. They learned how to hurt them. But the most important discovery came from old records buried in the station's database. The 12 species of the Dominion had not joined willingly. They had been conquered, one by one, over thousands of years. Their histories had been erased. Their cultures had been destroyed. They were slaves who had forgotten they were ever free. "This changes everything," Jake said quietly. "We're not just fighting we're fighting to free an entire galaxy." On Prime, Ambassador Grace Collins sat in a cell and waited. The walls were smooth and white. The light never changed. She had no way to measure time. Days might have passed or weeks. She did not know. But Grace was not idle. She watched and listened. Her guards spoke freely around her, thinking she could not understand their language. They were wrong. Grace had learned 7 human languages and 3 alien ones. She understood more than they knew. She heard about other prisoners, species who had the Dominion and failed, leaders who had tried to rebel and been crushed. They were kept here as examples, living warnings to anyone who might think of freedom. Grace began to talk to them. Through the walls, through whispers in the corridors, through coded messages left in their food trays. She learned their stories. She shared humanity's story, and slowly, carefully, she planted seeds of hope. "Humanity is different," she told a prisoner named, an old female who had once sat on the High Council, had spoken against the war. She had warned that humanity was dangerous. For her wisdom, she had been imprisoned. "You cannot defeat them," said. Her voice was tired. She had seen too many rebellions fail. "They are too strong. They have ruled for 40,000 years." Grace smiled. "That's exactly why they'll lose. They've forgotten how to fight someone who doesn't give up. They've forgotten what it means to face an enemy who would rather die than surrender." Looked at the small human woman with new eyes. She saw something there she had not seen in centuries. Not hope exactly, but something stronger. Certainty. Back on Earth, Admiral Torres reviewed her growing fleet. Ships arrived daily from the colonies. Most were not built for war. Mining vessels, cargo ships, transport ferries. Her engineers worked day and night to mount weapons and shields on anything that could fly. The training camps grew larger every week. Young men and women learned to fight in ways their ancestors would not have recognized. They trained in zero gravity. They studied alien biology. They practiced killing creatures that outweighed them by hundreds of pounds. Captain Stone led the most elite unit. They called themselves the Ghost Division. They were selected for their ability to think differently, to adapt, to survive against impossible odds. Trained them personally, pushing them beyond their limits and then pushing further. "They have rules," he told them. "Codes of honor, ways they expect war to be fought. We don't. We fight dirty. We fight smart. We fight until there's nothing left to fight with, and then we fight some more. His soldiers listened and learned. They would not fight like knights in a fairy tale. They would fight like wolves, striking from shadows, disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Council on the received reports of human activity. They read about the military buildup, the weapons development, the training camps. Most of them laughed. Humans were primitives. Their angry response was predictable and pathetic. Only Archon did not laugh. He remembered Commander's face in the recording. He thought about the human phrase he had found in captured databases, a phrase that humans used when they were angry. Payback, he whispered to himself. He did not fully understand what it meant, but something in the way humans said it made his old heart feel cold. He called for more ships to defend their borders. He ordered increased surveillance of human space. His commanders obeyed, but they thought he was being paranoid. The humans were nothing, less than nothing. The Dominion had crushed greater threats before. 6 months after the attack on Prime, Admiral Torres stood before her completed fleet. 80 warships, armed with weapons they had never seen. Crews trained to fight in ways they could not imagine. And behind them, the entire human race, united in a way they had never been before. She gave no speeches. She issued no declarations. She simply looked at the stars and gave a single order. Begin. The war for the galaxy had started, and humanity intended to finish it. They expected a direct attack. They prepared their defenses, massed their fleets, and waited for the primitive humans to throw themselves against superior firepower. They waited for weeks. Nothing happened. Then the reports started coming in. A supply convoy disappeared near the outer colonies. A communication relay went silent. An outpost stopped responding. Small losses, barely worth noticing. But they kept happening again and again, always in different places. Captain Stone smiled as his ship drifted through the wreckage of another supply depot. The Ghost Division had struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements arrived. They left no survivors to report what they had seen. Move to the next target, ordered. His crew obeyed silently. They had learned to work without speaking, communicating through gestures and shared understanding. In the darkness of space, silence was their greatest weapon. Admiral Torres watched the reports from her command ship. The strategy was working. They had stretched their forces across 1,000 systems. They could not protect everything, and humans were very good at finding the weak spots. But the physical attacks were only part of the plan. The real war was being fought in minds and hearts. Across the galaxy, strange messages began to appear on alien communication systems. They were simple, translated into hundreds of languages. They told stories. Stories of the original species who had been conquered by the long ago. Stories of cultures destroyed and histories erased. Stories of freedom that had been stolen. You are not always slaves, the messages said. You can be free again. Humanity will help you. Most aliens ignored the messages at first. Fear of them was too strong. But some listened. Some remembered old legends their grandparents had whispered. Some began to ask questions they had never dared to ask before. On 6 different worlds, small rebellions began. Nothing major. Protests, work stoppages, acts of sabotage. They crushed them quickly, but new ones appeared just as fast. Their forces were being pulled in too many directions. They could not fight humans and control their own empire at the same time. Commander grew frustrated. He had started this war with his attack on Prime. He had expected glory and praise. Instead, he found himself chasing shadows. Every time he moved his fleet to one location, the humans struck somewhere else. They fight like cowards, he complained to Archon. They will not face us in open battle. Said nothing. He was reading reports from his intelligence officers. The humans were not fighting like cowards. They were fighting like predators, patient, careful, and deadly. The confrontation came at a place called the Nebula. It was a cloud of gas and dust, beautiful and dangerous. Ships that entered it lost their long-range sensors. Communication became difficult. It was the perfect place for an ambush. They sent 300 warships into the nebula. Their commanders were confident. Even blind, they outnumbered the human fleet 3-1. They had bigger ships, stronger weapons, and thousands of years of combat experience. Victory was certain. Admiral Torres positioned her 80 ships at the heart of the nebula and waited. Her crews checked their weapons for the 100th time. Dr. Ben had given them new tools. Missiles designed to disrupt nervous systems. Energy weapons calibrated to pierce their specific shield frequencies. Tactics that exploited weaknesses no one else knew existed. Jake commanded the destroyer Vengeance from the front line. He had refused any position that did not put him in direct combat. He owed a debt to the dead, and he intended to pay it personally. "They're coming," Amy Grant reported. She had been promoted to his second-in-command. She had earned it. 300 contacts approaching from the Galactic East. Jake nodded. "Signal the fleet. Operation Thunderstrike is a go." The Battle of Nebula began with light. The humans activated hundreds of flares scattered throughout the nebula, blinding sensors even further. In the confusion, human ships moved into positions they had planned months ago. The fleet entered the killing zone without knowing it. They expected their enemies to flee or surrender. Instead, they found themselves surrounded. The first wave of human missiles was unlike anything they had seen. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated. They changed direction at the last moment, slipping past defensive fire. When they hit ships, they did not just explode. They disrupted. Shields flickered and died. Systems failed. Crews stumbled as their neural implants overloaded. Then the human ships attacked. Jake drove the Vengeance into the heart of the enemy fleet. His weapons fired continuously, targeting the weak points Ben had identified. A battleship twice his size tried to block his path. He did not slow down. His ship's enhanced shields absorbed the enemy fire long enough for him to get close. Then he launched his special weapon. It was a boarding pod, but not for troops. Inside was a device Ben had built using captured technology. When it penetrated the battleship's hull, it released a pulse that spoke directly to biology. Every crew member on the ship collapsed instantly, their nervous systems temporarily paralyzed. The battleship drifted helplessly. Jake's crew captured it in minutes. Across the nebula, similar scenes played out. Human ships fought with coordination that could not match. They communicated through methods the enemy could not jam. They adapted to every tactic they tried, changing their approach faster than their opponents could respond. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the remains of 241 ships floated in the nebula. Some were destroyed. Others were captured intact, their crews unconscious or surrendering. Human losses totaled 12 vessels. Admiral Torres stood on her bridge and looked at the reports. They had won. Against impossible odds they had won. But she did not celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning. "Send the recordings to every inhabited system," she ordered. "Let the galaxy see what happened here." The recordings spread like fire. Species who had served the Dominion watched in disbelief. The mighty, defeated by the young humans they had dismissed as primitives. The impossible had happened. On Prime, Grace Collins heard the news from a sympathetic guard. She passed it to the other prisoners. For the first time in years, she heard them laugh, not with humor but with hope. The old who had warned against provoking humanity wept silently in her cell. She had been right. She had been right all along. The High Council met in emergency session. Some demanded immediate revenge. Others counseled caution. For the first time they were divided. For the first time they were afraid. Archon listened to them argue and felt old in a way he never had before. He had ruled for 3,000 years. He had seen countless species rise against the Dominion. All of them had failed. All of them had been broken. But these humans were different. They did not just fight with weapons. They fought with ideas. They fought with stories. They fought with a fire that would not go out no matter how much water you poured on it. He made his decision. If the humans would not fight by the old rules, neither would he. He would gather every ship the Dominion possessed. He would strike at the heart of human civilization. He would destroy Earth itself and scatter humanity to the winds of space. It was a desperate plan. It was a plan that admitted the enemy was stronger than expected, but was too old for pride. He wanted victory, whatever the cost. Commander was given command of the attack fleet. 1,000 ships, the largest force assembled in 10,000 years. He accepted the honor with fierce joy. Finally, he would crush the humans who had made him look foolish. "Burn their world," told him. "Leave nothing behind. Make them a warning to anyone who might think of challenging us again." Smiled with all four of his hands clenched into fists. "It will be done." But as the fleet prepared to launch, a small piece of news reached the council. The prisoners on Prime had escaped. Among them was the human ambassador and the traitor. They had vanished into the chaos of a station-wide rebellion. And they had taken something with them, something dangerous. They had taken the truth about the Dominion's past, the truth about the conquered species, the truth that could destroy an empire 40,000 years old. The war had entered a new phase, and humanity was just getting started. The escape from Prime began with a whisper. Grace Collins had spent months building her network, a guard who hated his superiors, a technician who remembered stories of his species' freedom, a maintenance worker who could access any door on the station. Small pieces, carefully gathered, waiting to be used. When the moment came, it happened fast. Alarms blared across the station. Power flickered and died in key sections. Doors opened that should have stayed locked, and in the chaos, prisoners walked out of their cells. Led Grace through corridors she had walked as a council member long ago. The old moved slowly, her body weakened by years of imprisonment, but her mind was sharp. She knew every secret passage, every hidden room, every forgotten corner of the station. "Here," she said, stopping at a wall that looked like every other wall. Her four hands pressed a pattern on the surface. A door appeared where none had been. The archives, everything the Dominion wants to forget. Inside were records older than human civilization. Data crystals containing the true histories of conquered species. Evidence of cultures destroyed, religions banned, languages erased. Proof that the Dominion was built on lies and blood. Grace downloaded everything she could. Her hands shook as she worked. This information could change the galaxy. It could turn the Dominion's own subjects against them. It could end the war before another shot was fired. They reached the shuttle bay as fighting erupted throughout the station. The prisoners had armed themselves. They fought with stolen weapons and desperate courage. Most of them would die. They knew it. They fought anyway. "We need to contact my people," Grace said as they boarded a small shuttle. "Can you pilot this thing?" Four hands moved across the controls with practiced skill. "I flew warships before your ancestors discovered fire. I think I can manage." The shuttle launched into space, dodging debris and weapons fire. Behind them, Prime burned. The station that had stood for 10,000 years was tearing itself apart as former slaves rose against their masters. But their escape had not gone unnoticed. Commander received word that the human ambassador was fleeing. He diverted 3 warships from his assembled fleet to intercept her. She would not escape. She could not be allowed to escape. Jake received the distress signal on the bridge of the Vengeance. Grace's shuttle was wounded, drifting, surrounded by enemies. He did not hesitate. "Set course for Prime," he ordered. "Maximum speed." Amy looked at him with worried eyes. "Sir, we'll be massively outnumbered. The fleet is preparing for the defense of Earth. We can't wait for reinforcements." "Then we go alone." Jake's voice was calm but hard as steel. Ambassador Collins has information that could win this war, and she's one of ours. We don't leave our people behind." The Vengeance flew through space like a bullet fired at the stars. Its engines burned hot enough to damage themselves. Jake did not care. He would save Grace or die trying. There was no third option. The three warships closed in on the damaged shuttle. They could have destroyed it easily, but wanted the ambassador alive. He wanted to make an example of her. He wanted to show the galaxy what happened to humans who the Dominion. Then the Vengeance arrived. Jake attacked without warning, his weapons blazing. The first ship took heavy damage before its crew even knew they were in a fight. The second turned to engage him, only to be hit by a spread of the neural disruption missiles. The third tried to flee. It did not get far. Amy guided the Vengeance alongside the crippled shuttle. Docking clamps locked into place. Atmosphere hissed as the two vessels joined. Grace Collins and stumbled aboard, exhausted but alive. "Commander," Grace said, managing a tired smile, "you have excellent timing." Jake nodded. "We need to leave now. Fleet is assembling. They're coming for Earth." "I know." Grace held up the data storage device. "But I have something that might stop them. The truth about the Dominion. Every lie they've told. Every crime they've committed. If we can broadcast this across the galaxy." "People will rise," finished. "My people. All the peoples they've enslaved. The Dominion will burn from within." There was no time to celebrate. Alarms screamed as more ships appeared on sensors. The warship that himself commanded was among them. He had come personally to finish what he had started at this very station, months ago. "Get us out of here," Jake ordered. But even as he spoke, weapons fire struck the Vengeance. The ship shuddered. Systems failed. They were trapped. His voice came through the communication system. He had forced a connection, overriding human encryption with technology. "Commander, I remember you. You ran from me once. You will not run again." Jake looked at the image of the commander on his screen. The alien who had killed his friends. The alien who had started a war that consumed the galaxy. "I wasn't running," Jake said quietly. "I was remembering." Ship moved closer, preparing to board. Jake made his decision. "Amy, take command. Protect the ambassador. Get her back to Earth." He unholstered his sidearm and checked the charge. "I'm going to buy you some time." "Sir, you can't," Amy started. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Jake walked toward the airlock. "Get the truth out there. Win the war. That's what matters." He crossed between the ships through the boarding tube that's crew had attached. On the other side, soldiers waited. Jake did not care. He fought through them with a fury that surprised even himself. Humans were smaller and weaker than, but humans did not stop. Humans did not give up. He found on the command deck. The commander was huge, nearly twice Jake's height. His 4 arms each held a weapon. His eyes showed amusement. "You came to die," said. "Alone, outmatched. Why?" Jake raised his weapon. "Because some things are worth dying for. You wouldn't understand. You've never believed in anything except power." They fought. It was not a fair fight. Was stronger, faster, and better trained. His 4 arms gave him advantages Jake could not match. Within minutes, Jake was on the ground, bleeding from a dozen wounds. His weapon was gone. His strength was failing. Stood over him, raising a blade for the killing blow. "Any last words, human?" Jake looked up at the alien who had destroyed his ship, killed his friends, and started a war. He thought about the dead. He thought about the living. He thought about humanity's stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And then he moved. It was not a sophisticated attack. It was not elegant or skilled. Jake simply grabbed his leg and refused to let go. The stumbled, surprised. In that moment of confusion, Jake pulled a small blade from his boot and drove it upward. The blade found its mark. Fell, his 4 hands clutched at the wound in his chest. His eyes showed something Jake had never seen in a before. Fear. Hal gasped. "You were beaten, you were finished." Jake stood on shaking legs. Blood dripped from his wounds. He could barely breathe. But he was alive and his enemy was not. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We're never finished. We're never beaten. Not until the last one of us stops breathing. And even then we leave behind people who remember, who carry on, who never forgive." He left dying on the deck and made his way back to the Vengeance. Behind him, the warship fell into chaos as its crew discovered their commander was dead. Amy had used the distraction well. The Vengeance broke free and jumped to hyperspace before the remaining ships could react. Grace tended to Jake's wounds as the stars streaked past outside. His injuries were severe. He might not survive the journey home. "You're insane," she told him. "You know that, right?" Jake managed a weak smile. Had to be done. Was the one who started all this. Seemed fitting that he should be the one to see how it ends. Watched the humans with something like wonder. She had lived for 3,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. But she had never seen anything like these strange, small, stubborn creatures who refused to know when they were beaten. "You might actually win," she said quietly. "Against all logic, against all history, you might actually win." Jake closed his eyes. His body hurt. His mind was tired. But somewhere deep inside, a fire still burned. "We will win," he said, "because we don't know how to do anything else." The Vengeance flew toward Earth, carrying the truth that would shake the galaxy. Behind them, the Dominion's greatest fleet prepared its final attack. The last battle was coming, and humanity was ready. Earth had never looked more beautiful. Blue oceans and green continents glowed beneath a sea of stars. Clouds drifted lazily across familiar shapes. From orbit, it seemed peaceful, untouched by the war that had consumed the galaxy. Admiral Torres knew that peace was about to end. 1,000 warships were coming, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Their mission was simple: destroy Earth and scatter humanity forever. They would arrive within hours. Looked at her own forces. The first strike fleet had grown since the Battle of Nebula, but they still numbered less than 200 proper warships. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Then she looked at the rest. Behind the warships floated a collection of vessels that no military commander would call a fleet. Mining ships with weapons bolted to their hulls. Cargo transports loaded with explosives. Private yachts crewed by civilians who had never fired a weapon. Thousands of them, gathered from every corner of human space. "They all volunteered," Amy Grant reported. She had been promoted again after the rescue of Ambassador Collins. Jake was still recovering from his wounds, but he had insisted on being present for the battle. He sat in a chair on the bridge of the command ship, bandaged and pale but alert. Every single one of them. Nodded slowly. This was humanity's answer to the Dominion. Not just soldiers, but everyone. Farmers and factory workers, teachers and traders, old and young. They had come to defend their home. Grace Collins stood beside at the communication console. The data they had stolen from Prime was ready, translated into every language spoken in space, waiting to be broadcast at the perfect moment. "The truth will spread as soon as we transmit," Grace said. "Every species in the Dominion will see who their masters really are, what they really did." "Will it matter?" asked. "Will they rebel in time to affect this battle?" His ancient face was grim. "Some will, some won't. The Dominion has controlled them for thousands of years. Breaking that control takes time." She paused. "But seeds of doubt grow fast once planted. Even if we fall here today, the Empire will never be the same." The fleet arrived like a storm of light. 1,000 ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Silver and blue, gleaming with power that humanity could barely comprehend. Their commander was no longer. A new admiral named had taken his place. He was old and experienced, a veteran of wars humanity had never heard of. He expected an easy victory. He was wrong. opened a channel that both fleets could hear. Her voice was calm and steady. "This is Admiral Tors of the United Human Coalition. You have come to destroy our home. You have come to end our species. You think we are primitives. You think we will break." She paused, letting her words echo across the void. "You are about to learn why that was a mistake." She gave the order, "All ships engage." The Battle of Earth began. Human warships moved with coordination that surprised them. They had studied human tactics since Nebula. They thought they understood, but humans never fought the same way twice. Every captain had been given one instruction: improvise. The civilian ships scattered into the asteroid belt near Mars. Some of them died quickly. Others survived long enough to launch their payloads. Asteroids the size of buildings, pushed by mining equipment, flew toward the fleet. They were slow and clumsy, easy to destroy. But there were thousands of them. They had to divert weapons to destroy the rocks. That meant fewer weapons pointed at human warships. And while they were distracted, Stone's Ghost Division struck from behind. His special operations ships had been hiding, powered down, for days. They activated now, driving into the heart of the enemy fleet. Each one carried the neural disruption weapons Ben had designed. Each one targeted a specific ship: command vessels, communication hubs, the eyes and ears of the fleet. Admiral found himself suddenly blind. His sensors were jammed. His communications were scrambled. His carefully planned formation dissolved into chaos. "Fight," he screamed at his crews. "Fight individually if you must. Destroy them." They were still powerful. Their ships were still deadly. Human vessels died by the dozens as the battle raged. But for every human ship that fell, two more took its place. The civilians who had no business being in a war fought with desperate courage. They rammed their ships into enemy weapons. They sacrificed themselves to protect military vessels. They died so that others might live. Jake watched from the command ship's bridge. His wounds ached, his vision blurred, but he could not look away. "They're not giving up," he whispered. "None of them are giving up." The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it ended, the space around Earth was filled with wreckage. Hundreds of human ships had been destroyed, but the fleet had been reduced to 53 vessels. The survivors fled in disorder, their great invasion shattered against human stubbornness. Admiral Tors allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she turned to Grace. "Now send the transmission." The truth spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species under rule saw their real history. They learned about their ancestors who had been free. They saw evidence of the lies they had been told for thousands of years. They heard a simple message, repeated in every language: "You are not alone. Humanity stands with you. Be free." The response was immediate. Rebellions erupted on dozens of worlds. Forces were overwhelmed. The empire that had stood for 40,000 years began to crumble from within. But was not finished. "Commander," she said, looking at Jake, "are you able to command?" Jake stood with effort. His body screamed in protest. "Yes, ma'am." "Then take the second fleet to not to destroy it, to liberate it." She met his eyes. "Show them that humanity is better than they were. Show them what mercy looks like." The second fleet was smaller than the first. Just 40 ships, all that could be spared from Earth's defense, but they were enough. Jake's force arrived at the defined chaos. The planet's orbital defenses had been stripped to fill the fleet that attacked Earth. Its citizens had seen the broadcasts. They knew the truth about their leaders now. Many of them were in the streets, demanding change. Jake could have bombarded the planet. He could have destroyed their cities and killed millions. He could have taken revenge for everything they had done. He chose differently. His ships landed troops not to conquer but to protect. They secured the government buildings and prevented violence. They captured the remaining leaders and held them for trial. They broadcast a message that echoed across the shattered empire. "We are not conquerors. We are the end of conquest." Archon was found in his palace alone. His advisors had fled. His guards had abandoned him. He sat on his throne and waited for death. Jake came to him personally. The human commander was still weak from his wounds. He had to lean on a soldier for support, but he came. "You started this," Jake said quietly. "Your empire, your wars, your decision to attack us." Looked at the small human with tired eyes. "I know what you will do. I have done the same to others many times. Kill me and be done with it." Jake shook his head. "No, you don't get to die as a martyr. You get to live. You get to watch everything you built fall apart. You get to see the species you conquered become free. You get to spend the rest of your long life knowing that you could have avoided all of this if you had just left us alone." Was taken to a barren moon, far from civilization. He would spend his remaining years there, alone with his memories and his regrets. The war ended not with a grand treaty but with 1,000 small surrenders. Commanders gave up their ships. Governors opened their gates. Species who had been slaves found themselves suddenly free. They formed a new alliance, one based on equality rather than fear. Humanity was invited to join. Grace Collins, now recovered from her ordeal, led the delegation that accepted. "We came to the stars looking for friends," she said in her speech to the new Galactic Council. "We found an empire that wanted to crush us. We found species who had forgotten how to be free, but we also found courage. We found hope. We found allies we never expected." She smiled. "The galaxy is vast. There is room for all of us. Let us build something better together." Admiral Torres retired to Earth, where she wrote her memoirs and tended a garden. Stone continued to lead the Ghost Division, now repurposed for exploration rather than war. Amy Grant became one of the youngest admirals in human history. And Jake, he turned down every promotion offered to him. When asked what he wanted, he gave a simple answer: "A ship, a crew, and stars I haven't seen yet." He was given command of a new vessel, built for exploration. Its mission was not war but discovery. Jake stood on its bridge as it launched into the unknown, finally at peace. 300 years later, a young historian studied the ancient texts. She found a warning written by before she died of old age, surrounded by friends of many species. "If you must remember one lesson from our fall, remember this: humans are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest, nor the oldest, but they possess something we never understood: an inability to accept defeat. They bend, but they do not break. They fall, but they rise again. They are warned, but they do not listen to fear. Do not provoke them. Do not threaten what they love. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. For if you do, you will learn what we learned too late. The galaxy's deadliest mistake is believing that humanity can be conquered. They cannot. They will not. They never will." The historian closed the text and looked out her window at a galaxy transformed. Humans and worked together now. The old hatreds were fading. The new generation knew only peace. But they remembered the lesson. Everyone remembered. Some species should not be provoked. Humanity was one of them.